Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. We're about to start. Okay, so I think we are all in. Well, first of all, thanks for joining. The idea of the online tech talk today is to present a little bit about Cognito and how we set up the authentication for our GraphQL API on a project we are currently working on. So let me begin. The first disclaimer, what are the OTTs, the online tech talks? This is a shared space. This is a space we create from the architecture team so we can share knowledge among the teammates. The idea is to create something simple to show something that we were doing during the last week or something where maybe are currently doing some research we've been doing, create a blog presentation, or if we created a blog presentation or any technology updates we might want to present. So we are open to that. The idea is to, again, to share knowledge and to get something from this to home. So disclaimer done. What are we going to talk about today is AWS Cognito. Regarding the definition, the definition from AWS, Cognito is just simple service that AWS provides to actually help you manage and synchronize apps securely within all the user devices. So the idea is that you use Cognito to decouple all the user management from your API, so you don't have to be responsible for that, and you can rely on their services. A few benefits of using Cognito would be to have, it's an easy configuration. I mean, creating user pools is actually very easy. Cognito provides you several options to do it, so you can actually define the amount of data you want to provide for the authentication. You can choose whether the user can log in or sign up using social networks like Facebook, Google, or Apple in this case. You can set up some properties regarding the password strength. You get automatic emails on out of the hood. I mean, under the hood, they already provide that. So that's actually a really helpful thing to do to improve the speed when you're trying to incorporate authentication on your service API or your client website. Another of the benefits is that they provide a few triggers, so you can customize the flow. You can customize the flow the user will experience once for example, they sign in or they sign up. You have something called, for example, in this case, we're using something called a pre-sign-up trigger, and the idea is to provide the user the functionality and the flexibility to sign up using their email and password. But on top of that, if the user tries to sign in with Google and they're using the same email, this trigger will check that and will try to merge both users, so you can prevent any duplication on the user pool. So that becomes very handy when you're trying to manage a big amount of users. Another of the benefits is that they securely store sensitive information of the user, so you don't have to store passwords, or, for example, in the project we are working, we need to be HIPAA compliant because we are handling some sensitive information regarding the user. I mean, we have some reports, some medical reports of the user, and we can't link those medical reports with personal information of the user. So to prevent that, we rely on Cognito to store any sensitive information of the user, and we can link them together using, for example, a username that is randomly generated by Cognito after the user is logged in. So we can be safe that that information won't mix, and we won't need to store the password, which is something that if you have any information leakage in your database or any attack, you can be sure that that information will remain secure. Another of the benefits I found is that they provide the Amplify service, which on top of that, they have a library, so you can integrate. And the idea is that Amplify by itself gives you a lot of functionality and flexibility on how to integrate Cognito on your app and your API, both of them. So they give you possibilities like a hosted UI, so you can use any hosted UI by them to conduct all the authentication flow, or you can use the library with some pre-built components, which is really helpful and improve the speed of the developers to integrate Cognito into in a front end or in an application, in a web app or in a mobile app. Or if you prefer to have everything customized, you can of course call their methods manually. So they give you on the library the possibility to call the sign-in method, the sign-up method, and again, you have the flexibility to customize that. You have the flexibility to use your components, which for me is actually a big sell point. And on top of that, the library handles behind the scenes the refresh token functionality. So that's actually another benefit, since just querying the current session user, that will check whether the session has expired, the token has expired, and will try to refresh the token for you. So you will always have a refresh token. Some of the caveats we found along the roadmap we have on the project is that all the pool settings are at the creation time. So what does it mean? If you create a pool and you set up, for example, the properties and the strength of the password or whatever you want to set up there, once it's created, if you need to change something, you have to actually delete that pool and create a new one. There's no way to edit those settings. So that might be problematic for the development cycle. But once you have everything set up, we found out that it doesn't change very often. So let me show you a little bit how we are handling the authentication flow on our mobile app. So the idea is to have Amplify installed, the library Amplify installed on the client. We are working with a React Native app. So we delegate using our custom components. We manually call the sign-in method inside the Amplify SDK, that providing password and email. In this case, we sign in to the user pool, and from there, the user pool will return all the user information we need and a JWT token. If, for example, we need to sign up using any of the method, for example, Google sign up or user an email and password sign up, we are going to fire the trigger I just told you, and we're going to compare if that user already exists on the pool and try to merge the user. So that functionality becomes really handy at the sign up moment. After that, once we have the JWT token, what we do is basically set up that token as a header, authorization header, using beer token. And on the other side, on the GraphQL API, what we are doing is basically working with Passport and a JWT strategy. And we use something called a GraphQL guard middleware. What it does, basically, it reads the authorization header. It turns that into valid user data, comparing to the pool and checking if the user if the token is correct. If there's any issue in the middle, it will return an authorized it will return an authorized response, and if not, we are going to inject that user into the context request, and from there we're going to pass to the resolvers. So the idea is that if we need to access the user, or if we need to create some conditions based on which user is logged in, it's really easy to check because it's already in the context with this user. And from there, okay, the normal use of the API, going to the services, and etc. Basically, that's the way we handle for right now the authentication. Another thing to mention, which is actually really cool, is that the user pools also provide some user groups. So, for example, if you need to handle authorization on top of the authentication based on the groups, that's something you can add to the payload of the token. So it's easy to check if you need to authorize some pieces of the app based on on a role or on a group. So that's another pro of using Cognito. What I'm about to show you, give me 1 second, because I have to share again. I'm going to show you some code about how we implement that. 1 second. There you go. So basically, as I told you, we have a few pieces. This is a Nest.js API. The idea is to, first of all, we have an auth module where we register the JWT module. It's provided by Nest. On top of that, we create a JWT strategy, which grabs all the configuration from the user pool we already created. So as you can see, we manage environment variables for the client ID, the region, and the user pool, and we sign the registration of the strategy. After that, we are using the extract JWT method to actually extract all the user information from the better token. And from there, we run a validate function, which is, in this case, since we don't need to log in manually, the idea is that we search for the user in the database based on the username. And if the user doesn't exist, we create a user and we retrieve it afterwards. So it's actually very simple. And on top of that, the idea, since we are working with a GraphQL API, the idea is that we need to create what is called a GOR to inject that as a middleware. And the way GraphQL works, we are getting the context, and from the context, we can inject the request to actually access the user later on. So I can show you a little bit of resolver. As you can see here, it's as simple of just doing that using the GOR. We already exported from the GOR created and the context. It will run all the validation methods and it will check if the user is there or not. And from there, as you can see here inside the same method, we can grab the user based on the request from the context. So accessing the logged in user is actually very easy and it becomes very handy, so you can port this into another method later on. So that's pretty much the way it works. I can show you really quick. We have a query here. It's actually very simple, but as you can see here, this query is being authenticated, and if for some reason the bearer token is invalid, it will show unauthorized, so everything is in place. If I remove the guard from the resolver, that particular query, in this case, will be publicly accessible. So it's very easy to handle authenticated and unauthenticated queries. So this is the way we implement it. Because of the time, I won't show the client side, but if that's something you're interested in, this is a React Native app. Again, we created some custom components and we integrated Amplify the SDK directly, calling manually the method. So maybe we can create another session for that. Give me one other second to show you. So if there is any question, please, this is the time. Sure.
Is the front end authenticating with Cognito directly and then invoking the backend, passing the token?
Exactly.
Or the front end authenticates with the backend and the backend with Cognito?
In
Because
this
I
case,
think I've seen both.
In this case, we are authenticating directly with the front end with Cognito, and Cognito is just and the front end is passing the authentication token to the backend, and the backend is just creating the user on the fly.
The
Checking
backend
with Cognito,
exactly.
Exactly.
Okay.
There are some cases where you don't want to store. For example, in this case, since we are using async storage, we can hash the data stored in the phone, so it's not a problem. But there are some cases where that might present a security issue. So there's some ways to prevent that. So you can use like a reverse proxy service where you send that token and you create a new token, and you can store that in the client instead of the Cognito token. So there are a few ways to actually manage that depending on the case, the use case. The good thing is that Amplify gives you a lot of flexibility when you need to set up the authentication based on the client or the backend. What you say is actually right too. You can, if you want, you can send the information to the backend, and the backend can authenticate to Cognito. But some people might say that that's a security issue, since maybe you are passing information to the backend and the backend is holding some password information. So again, depending the use case, you can fit one solution or the other.
And do you know if we can do it through the backend as well if we are authenticated with social networks?
Yes, because the token is actually the same. Basically, what you have to do there is sending. There is some params you can send if that's a login, a social login. But there is a possibility to actually sign in through the backend to Cognito. Okay.
I have a question, Guille.
Sure.
As far as I understood, whenever you receive a request from the front end, you get the token. And are you sending a request in every request you receive to Cognito, or are you using any caching?
No, we have some long-living tokens. For example, in this case, it's just 1 hour. So,
Okay, so
the token is being cached for 1 hour. We are using that cache method. There, you have a way to set up on the passport settings. You can check whether to actually take into account the timing. So if the token is expired, it will become invalid, and you can turn that off and it won't be invalid, so it will check on every request. So yes, we can check that. On top of that, you can set some refresh token functionality on the client side. For example, given that just querying for the current session user on using the Amplify SDK, Cognito will actually check whether that token is valid or not. If not valid, we'll refresh the token and we'll retrieve you a new token. So you can have a refresh mechanism on the front end, and the user shouldn't be locked out until, for example, you want it. You can actually disable users from the pool if that's something you need, and that token will become invalid and the user can lock out. So
great, interesting.
the way we are handling right now the client is, for any reason there is an authorized and unauthorized error coming from the backend, we'll log out the client and we just present the login screen again. So
perfect, thank you.
Sorry, I had one more question.
Sure.
And this is not in the authentication, but actually on the registration part. When we are doing registration, we have all this, call it bureaucracy of validating the email, having different password security tactics and things like that.
That's something you can actually set up. Let me show you because I don't think I can show you the tab. Give me 1 second. As you can see here, as you can see here, the policies for the sign up, the strength of the password, that's something you can set up from the user pool directly. If you want 2MFA, again, you can do it. If you prefer the user to be logged in only with username or with email or phone, you can actually request a validation by phone or by email. So that's something the pool handles for you. So yeah, depending on the use case, you can actually customize the way the user, the flow should be presented for the user. I mean, again, if you need to ask for certain properties of the user, Cognito gives you a lot of choices, and if that particular choice is not there, you can actually add custom choices to present the user, to ask the user on the sign-up page.
Cool. So Cognito automatically integrates with email sending and perhaps with some sort of SMS sending.
Yes, exactly. So that's one of the benefits. I mean, you can, for example, customize the look and feel of the email, but all the email sending for forgot password or for sign up or for code verification, whatever you need to set up, it's out of the hood. So that's actually good because you don't have to configure that.
Also, all the email templating in for that, it's not a request to the backend to send the email, it's actually Cognito sending the emails.
Exactly. It's directly Cognito. So you can set up the different templates and Cognito will take care of them.
And does it allow me to tap into that process, like to create a Lambda or something like that when I'm receiving the email validation or something like that, so I can do some custom processing if I need to?
Yes, actually, that's the trigger part. So, for example, we are using a pre-sign-up trigger, but you have a pre-authentication or post-authentication trigger. So you can create a custom Lambda to do anything you need to do after the user is logged in. So, for example, post-confirmation, that will be your case. So, depending the use case, actually the good thing here is that you can actually customize the flow in any way you need.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions?
May I ask more or less an order of magnitude of how long it took you to have registration and authentication?
Well, actually, once we decide upon the properties or everything that we need to ask for the user, the strength of the password, that took most of the time because we need to actually check that with the client too. But a few days, because we were creating the components by hand, and that took a few days. And from there, integrating with the client side with Cognito, it was actually really easy, a few hours, because I mean, the documentation is actually really good. There are a few edge cases that you might not find on the documentation, but if you are going for the normal flow, it's just a few hours. It's not a big deal.
When you say a few days, you're saying 2-3 days or 15 days?
No. 2 days. 2 days. To set up basically the entire flow, 2 days. Sign up and sign in 2 days can be done. Even if you use their solution with their components, so they provide you some pre-built components on the Amplify SDK, so you can use their components, and that's automatically paired with the Cognito based on the environment variable, so it's easier.
Beautiful. No more questions. Thank you, Guille.
Perfect. So 1 more second, just to. Okay, so basically, if that's it, thank you everyone for joining. Again, another disclaimer, if you have any doubts or if you want to present yourself or conduct any OTT, please let us know in Slack. That's it.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a nice weekend.
Have a nice weekend too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.